and gentlemen, welcome to Game of Thrones Perspective, a podcast between me and my friend Alex, who has recently finished watching all of Game of Thrones. As a courtesy to all of you, I just wanted to remind you that this is a spoiler-filled podcast.
Emperor Palpatine gets shafted by Vader and lives to ask his grandson to join the dark side.
If you have not yourself watched all of Game of Thrones, or at least up until whatever season is in the description below, please consider listening to another podcast for the time being, and come back whenever you're ready, or if you don't care about spoilers, go ahead and stick around and listen in.
Gollum tries to swim in lava and obviously fails.
Just as a reminder, also, I'm the one who has watched this show many times before, so I'm coming at it from kind of a more grounded, I understand the logic of the world perspective. Alex is coming at it from somebody who's only watched the show once.
Spock dies, but not Zachary Quinto's Spock.
With that being said, let's go ahead and begin the episode.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for tuning in to Game of Thrones Perspectives. This episode, we're going to be talking about Season 3. You want to harmonize with me a little bit, everybody? Okay.
Season 3.
Anyway, we are talking about Season 3 today. So,
Talk about lack of harmony.
I mean, yes.
Talk about Season 3.
Oh,
man.
Yeah, we're of the, now, at this point, only like 2.5 kings, maybe, if you don't really count Balon, because truly, at this point, it's just Robb Stark versus the world.
Yeah, the guy has some obstacles to get through and over and under and around, and just,
The sheer incompetence of people within his army, of his own stupidity by, screwing up the Frey Alliance.
Three things he did wrong.
Yeah.
And they led to the worst, best, some would say, but worst episode in my mind in the season.
We'll get there.
I'm already crying.
Oh, okay. Well, stop.
I have two characters that are my absolute favorite
in this
season. In the entire series.
Oh, okay.
The entire series.
Well, we've already mentioned Robb Stark.
We know Robb Stark is
season 2
my favorite of the Stark children.
Mm-hmm.
Absolute favorite. King of the North, my forever King of the North. And then we'll get to the other character next season, but I'll tell you now.
Oh, yes.
Oberyn Martell. But we'll talk about him next season.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway. So, let's focus on Mr. Robb Stark, because it seemed like things were kind of going his way a little bit there with, he gets married, and he gets married for love, and it's super sweet, and, they go through the northern whatever wedding ceremony. The only really bad things that were happening to him was he couldn't quite kill the mountain, because that kind of sucked. He couldn't quite get the upper hand on Tywin Lannister. But ultimately, the news that Theon Greyjoy had betrayed him last season and had taken Winterfell and razed it to the ground was a big loss for him.
And the loss of, assumedly, his two brothers.
That he had lost both his brothers, and at this point, his spies, whatever spies he had heard, had no idea what had happened to Arya in the south. At this point, we all know that she is currently traipsing her way through the Riverlands, trying to get north with Gendry and Hot Pie at this point in time.
Making their way
north. And then Sansa is still a political prisoner down in King's Landing.
Which everyone's so happy about.
And at the end of last season, now that's the other thing, is right now, Robb is struggling in the beginning of Season 3 because his mother released his only bargaining chip.
The biggest bargaining chip you could have with the Lannisters.
Which, unfortunately, for the time period, his bargaining chip was Jaime Lannister, and obviously for that, Jaime Lannister was the firstborn son of Tywin, and also a man in their society, so that makes him of more value, unfortunately.
Especially a Tywin, who doesn't even see his second son as any kind of interest or inheritance.
The only reason Tywin even cared about his son Tyrion in Season 1 was if anybody ever dares to take a Lannister, they should be treated with absolute impunity. He should make sure to attack them or show them that Lannisters will fight back, even if it's the smallest member of their family.
And Tyrion served a purpose in becoming Hand of the King, and now, not so much.
Tyrion's not faring so well. But with Robb's case, he now has to decide what to do with his mother, who has now by all means, betrayed him.
The closest person to him.
Person he trusted above all else.
All else.
He sent to go and parley with Renly to try and get the Baratheon army on his side so that they could just absolutely pincer move Tywin.
It's going so well.
It was going great.
So well.
Stannis screwed that up, and then Catelyn screws that up by getting rid of his only other bargaining chip.
Mm.
So, and then on top of that, he married, Talisa Magar in the show, and that is Jane Westerling in the books. But with that, he loses also his Frey alliance.
He doesn't really realize how much he's lost at this point.
No,
but he knows
that
he's
still he's very aware of how things could go. He knows that he hangs on the tip of a knife right now. And so it's just about making the right choices to go through and go ahead.
Oh, and additionally, he also lost a very large friend in his alliance as well, in the Karstark.
The Karstarks. So with that, there was a raid where they had basically won a couple of victories against some Lannisters, and they had taken some nephews, cousins of Tywin, that were not as of importance as, say, Jaime Lannister, because they were just boys. They weren't even, the age of 12. They were
but children.
They were but children. And Lord Karstark lost his son fighting Jaime Lannister, and he had always wanted revenge against Jaime Lannister for killing his sons.
With Jaime gone,
he will never have his revenge, and in that case, Lord Karstark is angry at Catelyn for robbing him of that, and eventually he takes his revenge by killing both of these Lannister boys.
Something he was forbade.
Yeah, he was absolutely forbade from doing
that. From his king in the north. Mm-hmm. Robb specifically and explicitly stated, you are not to touch a hair on those boys' heads.
Exactly.
And he went ahead and just straight up murdered them.
He did.
And now Robb is in a very difficult political situation, isn't he?
Yeah.
Another huge ally, huge family backing him in the Karstarks, and who's up and betrayed him. Mm-hmm. So what can he do? He can say...
He could have kept him as a political prisoner, but ultimately what he does is he cuts off Karstark's head, which by all means was within his right to do so,
mm-hmm.
but he had to have known what was coming next when, after he kills Lord Karstark...
The head of the family.
Mm-hmm, the head of the family... He loses an important ally there, and a lot of men defect and just head home, head north, do what they need to.
No longer their king in the north, as they say.
I will say that scene is interesting to me when you... So, we talked about in Season 1, obviously, one of the first lessons we hear is the man who passes the sentence should swing the sword.
Of course, Ned Stark's great and holy words of the Stark family.
Those are great words because that's the kind of ruler you should be, is if you're going to pass the sentence, you should be willing to take that person's life into your hands. And Robb does that.
He does.
He kills Karstark himself.
Executes.
And he does it in a not Theon Greyjoy style.
No.
Because we didn't even talk about that really last season with Theon. Theon does the same thing because I'm trying to say it's Sir Roderick Cassel, who is the Master of Arms of Winterfell.
Right.
Was one of the resistors of Theon's reign of tyranny or whatever. His little raid.
Ugh.
And he sentences Roderick to death despite Bran's protests. And he almost has somebody else do it until Roderick literally shames him into the man who passes the sentence should swing the sword. And Roderick honestly shouldn't have done that.
No.
For his own pain of death.
No.
It would have been so much quicker, but instead, no. Theon botches it, absolutely, because he's just not there. He's not there to the point where he can take the responsibility that it takes to take someone else's life.
And Theon's he's just a weak character at this point. And they really show that both physically, he just can't get it done in one swing, and mentally, he's just not... I mean, he's known this guy his whole life. and he's passing this terrible, stupid sentence, all because he wants to be manly and this,
Which ultimately then his own men still don't respect him.
Nope, not at all.
Like, that's the thing. Is
They don't even see him as
when the Boltons came at the end of season 2, his own men literally tried to sell him off in hopes of getting themselves out. Now, whether or not that happened, I doubt it happened because it's Ramsay Bolton we're talking about. He most likely promised them that he would let them go for Theon and then eventually slaughtered them. So we never actually do find out what happened to those men, but I can safely assume that Ramsay Bolton
they're gone. They were his playthings more
But so that was actually on orders of Robb, because Roose had offered that his bastard Ramsay could go back and liberate Winterfell, and that's exactly what happened.
Yep.
We
don't know that's what happened
until this season.
Right.
We do see Theon in the dungeon.
We see Theon in the dungeon.
We'll get back to Theon here
we're
shortly.
talking about Robb.
We're still kind of on Robb. So, and I want to start with this because truly, this Robb storyline, as much as it pains me, it leads to one of the greatest episodes of all time, in my opinion. It is one of the best episodes of television, in my opinion, and we'll talk about it as we go through the Reigns of Castamere. But trying to think any other little things as the season goes on. They eventually have to go back to Catelyn's childhood home of River Run. They go to her father's funeral.
Blackfish.
Not
his.
I was gonna say the Blackfish is his brother.
Uncle, right?
Hoster Tully was the one whose funeral it was.
Yeah. Probably the funniest opening I've ever seen to an episode was.
Or just like a character introduction. It's like it just immediately shows us how incompetent Edmure Tully is. Because we're having like basically a Viking funeral. Hoster Tully is floating down the river. He's dead, and the whole point is his firstborn son is supposed to shoot a flaming arrow into his boats that'll eventually carry him on into the afterlife.
It's supposed to be really, really epic.
It's just supposed to be one of these nice things, and he just can't do it.
Oh, man.
He hit 3 arrows.
What?
3 arrows he fires off, and he just cannot manage it, to which then the literal blackfish of the family, the black sheep of the family, Blackfish, we all just call him Blackfish.
We call him Blackfish.
I literally can't even remember what his actual name is, but he's one of the Tullys who was Hoster's brother.
Yep.
And he was kind of the outcast of his family, but he's there for the funeral, and he saves the day for the funeral because without even really doing much effort, he takes the bow out of Edmure's hand and just immediately shoots it after looking at which way the wind's going, and without even looking to see if it hits, he hands the bow back and just walks away, and you see in the distance, thank God, because the boat's about to go around the river bend and never be seen again. The arrow, thankfully, hits the boat, and Hoster
you can just
gets
feel
proper
the disappointment in the air.
Oh, absolutely.
On Edmure's face.
I love Catelyn's faces that she makes every time one of his arrows misses, because she's just like, oh my gosh, can you just get this right, please?
Right. Man.
And then, of course, after that, we have a conversation with Edmure where, they talk about the importance of this stone mill. This stone mill that he tried to keep for Robb when it came to winning the war.
Yeah.
And it's like...
Trusting Edmure, another of his Robb's mistakes.
Just don't ever trust Edmure to get anything done.
Because as we can clearly
see... It's not
to
say that he's not a trustworthy person.
Oh,
it's just that he should not be given command of anything.
Completely incompetent.
And I love that scene where it's just like, I wanted to drive the mountain into the west so I could kill him. Because he is a mad dog. I love that. And how many men died for the stone mill and how many men did you kill? Because I may have won that battle, but I'm losing this war. And Robb's acknowledgement of that, I appreciate his self-awareness. He knows how many men he has, and while he had done great works when it came to beating Tywin's forces up to that point, he knew that ultimately he was losing.
That's what I love. That's what I love about Robb Stark, is even when everything seems to be going in his favor, he's still the tactician, and he's still that intelligent individual who will not let it go to his head. He knows what he needs to do, and ultimately, if you look at the big picture of things, he's just not getting there.
No.
And he knows that, and his options are getting thinner and thinner.
So as we go throughout the season, it's just us seeing this poor guy, and I mean, I wouldn't say poor until what happens, but he's doing his best to be the military commander he thinks his father would want him to be.
Right.
And then he gets to a point where he's going to try and win back Walder Frey's favor. And so, and he knows with Walder Frey, because they're just kind of the bastards of the continent. Everybody hates the Freys.
They control something significant that they themselves are not taken very seriously.
No, most people do not take them seriously. That's why, he's always been given the name of, the late Walder Frey. Like, he never took his alliances seriously. He never took his oaths seriously. Yeah. And why should he when, he feels like everybody around him has always laughed at him and spit on him? Whether or not you agree he deserves it or not. I believe he did. Absolutely.
Yeah.
He's a jackass.
Yeah.
But so he makes this last-minute Hail Mary to try and gain a few more numbers to then take that army and go and take Casterly Rock, which will it'll strike a significant blow at Tywin's legacy.
Yeah.
If he can take Tywin's castle, then it shows the other people in Westeros who don't like the Lannisters that, hey, they're not invincible. Gods can bleed.
Thus gaining them more allies and turning the tides of war.
Hopefully.
That's, right. His plan, extremely hopeful. He's a pillar of hope the entire season.
When the scene happens that he and his mother, at this point, he has now forgiven his mother for what's happened because she has kind of worked her way back into his trust and he understands where she was coming from on what she did to try and get the girls back.
That reconciliation is...
It's a good reconciliation.
It's important, too. It's really significant.
But when they are looking over the board to just say, here's all the troops, here's what we have, here's what we will have after we get the phrase, and the realization that they both have together that this is it. This is our Hail Mary. If we don't do this, it's over. So we're going to do this. And you feel, because of the fact that these are the protagonists that we are rooting for at this moment, they feel like they have the hero's journey kind of on their side, essentially, by what we know of fantasy tropes. It feels like a hopeful moment of, okay, let's get the phrase on board, let's get them to forgive us, and let's go and let's take Tywin's castle. And that leads to the Reigns of Castamere. The Red Wedding. So, from a book reader's perspective, from a lore perspective, this episode is a feat of show, don't tell when it comes to the storytelling. One of my favorite scenes is when Robb Stark enters into the court that Walder Frey has, and he's apologizing to all this, but before we even get to him apologizing to all of the people he basically spurned by not choosing to marry any of them, there's this little scene of bread and salt. And it's super significant because in Westerosi culture, that is such an important rite.
It's a northern thing too, isn't it?
Just in Westerosi culture in general. It's the guest rite. By offering your guest bread and salt, you are saying, come into my house, and I promise that you will be protected, you will get to eat off of my table, drink off of my table, and you will not have to fear anything happening to you.
You're entering in a safe haven.
You are in a safe haven because we have agreed by both partaking in the bread and salt. It is such a custom to these people. And it is sacred to these people. And everything that happens as a result of this moment where he has fully gained Robb's trust by doing this. It is such a spit in the face of Westerosi culture when what happens, happens. And as we go Walder Frey is absolutely goading Rob in trying to make fun of, his wife, his choices, all of these things.
From a watcher's perspective, the reason, that's it's a fantastic setup to begin to think, the Freys, they were spurned, but they seem to be forgiving, right? We aren't given a huge history on them, so we really can only take things as they come. In addition to that, you see the Freys organizing a marriage with Edmure in place of Rob, which is still part of his family, which it still all makes sense.
And it's still a higher born person than the Freys are used to.
Right.
Because Edmure is the head of one of the 8 major houses of Westeros.
Yeah. Again, pillar of hope. Everything in all of this is pointing towards this working out.
Yep. And hell, even with Walder Frey being who he is, like
the man was spurned. It's okay. He can be a little bit of a dick.
It almost seems like he's just gonna laugh it off and let's put this all behind us. Like he said, the wine will flow red, and let's put this whole mess behind us. Like, it almost seems like he is also forgiving, and he's just kind of that wacky, goofy character almost.
Right.
Like he's just being a bit of a misogynist, talking about how. Of course, you didn't betray me for love. You betrayed me for firm tits and a nice fit.
Right.
Like, just awful things to say to somebody, but,
He was spurned.
He was spurned.
Whatever.
So he kind of gets a little bit of, jabs off at Rob, and we'll take a couple of jabs if it means, hey, let's win the war.
Yep.
Who cares?
That's not what, and I think that's why Rob wasn't worried about the jabs, because, he understood that he was the one really in the wrong in that moment, and he's overly thankful, despite the jabs, of what this means for his alliance and the war, because he's a big picture guy.
Exactly.
So, of course, he's not thinking, this is all a ruse. Of course he's not thinking that.
No. And he's also just getting distracted. He gets caught up in the ceremony of it all,
And he's having a baby.
He's having a baby.
And he's having a little start.
Which we don't find out until in the middle of the wedding, so the whole ceremony comes through. And the funny thing is, I kind of like the little bait and switch they do with this, where every one of Frey's daughters that you had seen prior to this wasn't, a looker by any stretch of the imagination.
Edmure was surprised.
And some of them were like so young that it was just like, you just feel dirty, like even thinking of Rob ever having to have married one of these, or even Edmure.
Sure.
And for Edmure's sake, the fact that, because that's the thing, is when they make this wedding, whatever, the arrangements for this, it's literally, Edmure just has to marry one of my choosing at this point. Because, back when we were making the deal with Rob, he could choose anyone, but he spurned that. He loses out
so
on
you
that.
just, you get one I pick.
You get one I pick.
Right.
And he was at least nice enough, for lack of a better term, to let Edmure be married to one that is...
Yeah. I mean, he's pretty happy.
Edmure, when he finally sees his bride, is actually quite happy with his circumstances. Once again, another little pillar of hope for all of us that, okay, Edmure was complaining this whole time because he's like, oh, now I'm going to have to marry somebody, I didn't want to because of your mistake, blah, blah, blah. And then he actually seems like he's happy, and my lady, you delight me, when she's asking him at the altar or whatever.
Yeah.
And... it's just all of this stuff, and Walder Frey's being goofy again because he's kind of giving Rob the eye, like, look what you could have had instead of your wife, blah blah blah. It's just kind of funny at the time.
It just seems like Northerners being.
But once again, it just seems like things are going so well.
It's so intense.
Because here's the other thing. So when I watched that episode the first time, I wasn't even aware it was episode 9 of the 3rd season. I didn't even remember, and I didn't even think, like, episode 9, this is where happens.
Should happen.
This is where bad stuff happens.
No. It's such a de-escalating scene.
It really is. So, and then we go into the whole bedding ceremony at the end, and that's just another goofy little thing where all the ladies are grabbing Edmure, and he's like, oh, and it's super funny, and then Talisa's confused because she's obviously from across
the
North
what
Sea.
is this whole thing?
So that's not the tradition. And Rob actually gets to do a little bit of exposition that kind of makes sense from the story perspective, and it's just like, yeah, this is the bedding ceremony. Without it, you can't tell that the marriage was consummated. yada yada, and well, we don't have to worry about that because, well, we're having a baby. How would you like to teach little Edard how to ride? And it's just another pillar of hope right there. Like, we're just holding up this whole series right now on just like, they're having a baby. Everything seems to be going well. Edmure got married to somebody he actually seems to like. Even Catelyn, who had been so critical of Rob's choice to marry this woman, looks over and sees how happy they are. And in her head, I guarantee she was thinking, that's like what me and Ned were like. Yeah. Is that, it may not have been the marriage we chose. I mean, obviously, Rob chose that marriage. Clearly. Yeah. But with Catelyn's marriage, it was not a marriage she chose. They met on the first, It was not a marriage she chose. She was literally she was betrothed to Ned's older brother until he died. Yeah. And so then she ended up with Ned. And then they actually ended up falling in love with each other. That doesn't always happen with arranged marriages. No. And so she kind of sees this moment of just this happiness and love that is between these two people. And we see it too. And we're just both happy for it. But there are these little tiny things happening around us that, oh, Roose Bolton, why don't you drink some wine? Oh, I don't partake. And it's like, well, that's kind of weird. Why aren't you taking any wine, buddy? And some of Walder Frey's sons are kind of, sneaking around in the background. It's kind of weird. The big doors. And then as the wedding ceremony is being taken, then all of a sudden the heavy doors just close behind them, and things are kind of going in motion. And Catelyn looks around, and the music starts playing a different song. A sinister song.
A song we know.
At this point we have heard, whether it was whistled, sung, or just the actual instrumentation of it throughout the diegetic and or non-diegetic music of the show.
Tiny little building blocks leading to a gigantic event that no one saw coming.
No one saw coming.
And you go, what is that song? Why do I know that song?
No one saw it coming, but then when you look at the event, you understand that everything that led to this moment...
It all makes sense.
Makes absolute sense as Lord Walder Frey calls a toast to his king. And with that being said, everything he says seems like it's so not out of the ordinary. And Roose Bolton gives Catelyn this look of just like, you know what's coming, don't you? And she looks over at his arm and sees that his clothing is a little bit bulkier than usual. He looks down at it as well, acknowledging, like, you should check what's under there. And when she uncovers and sees that he is wearing his chainmail in the middle of a wedding, she knows everything is wrong. And she slaps Roose Bolton. And she tries to warn Rob as soon as she can. And it's just too little too late, as one of Frey's oldest sons takes a knife out and begins to stab Talisa in the belly, killing her unborn child and her at the same time. Crossbowmen who were once the band up in the rafters start firing crossbows. Men start killing all of the drunken Northmen. And Frey's men all start killing all the other northern
Everyone
men.
Else in the room that's been drinking and jolly.
And believing that they were safe because of the guest right. Everything falls apart in one horrifying and yet so well paced, well filmed, well acted instance. Yeah. As we watch everything just go.
All that hope. That big old pillar we have.
Rob now has multiple crossbow bolts in his chest. Catelyn has one in her shoulder, and she crawls from her current position over to Walder's table when he sees his wife hiding underneath the table. And as her last bargaining chip, she takes a knife and puts it to the wife's throat. Mm-hmm. And then we see the absolute two sides of the same spectrum of what a woman means to somebody in this society. Rob is given the opportunity to possibly run because Catelyn is distracting them with Walder Frey's wife. And he just sits there and he looks at his dead wife, the dead future, and he just can't bring himself to leave. Whereas when Catelyn is threatening to kill Walder Frey's wife, the same way that they had just killed Rob's wife, he coldly turns to her and says, I'll find another.
Yeah.
And after that, Roose Bolton comes up to Robb after he makes his final call out to his mother. And with his final sentence, the Lannisters send their regards. He stabs Robb through the heart. And in that moment, Robb dies. And Catelyn Stark cries out in absolute anguish, and she can no longer even control her own impulses as she accidentally slits, maybe purposely, I don't even know. At this point, the grief that she's feeling, I've never been able to figure out if that was a purposeful slitting of that throat or a accidental one. But she cries out and she gives up. She doesn't even have any strength left in her to fight as another Frey comes up and slits her throat down to the bone. And she falls dead. And the episode ends.
And the season ends.
No. There was one more episode after that.
Well,
but that scene ends, and thank God it ends with, if I recall, I don't think there was.
There's nothing. There was no music.
There was no music.
There was nothing. It was just
as it should be, because
silence.
that was what that scene needed. Was just you need a moment to take in what you had just watched. And the Red Wedding is one of the internet's best kept secrets, in my opinion, or at least it was while the show was still airing. Because unless you had gotten to that point personally or had read the books, you had no idea.
No clue.
You had no idea. But then, upon rewatching or even just looking back, all the actions that led to that moment make absolute sense. And we could just talk about just that. For this entire episode.
We very well could. I don't want to.
I don't want to because it is sad. The only thing I want to continue on that line while we're still kind of talking about the North and what happened to Robb Stark's legacy is more so than the Red Wedding itself. The next episode actually hits me even harder because Arya has to see, because Arya makes it, and we'll get to Arya's whole her journey here. But Arya had finally made it to the twins to hopefully find her family. And in the next episode, after she had witnessed Greywind, Robb's direwolf, being killed, the next episode, the Hound's taking her out of the twins as the chaos has now reached out into the camps surrounding the twins. And Arya has to see her brother's body with his direwolf's head sewed on. And I find that even more atrocious, because it just shows that these people were willing to desecrate the dead even further by doing that. And it's just such an awful realization that this poor young girl, who at this point is probably, 12, 13? Yeah. I don't even know how old Arya was considered at that point. But too young to be having to see that after everything else she has seen.
Her father
dying.
Her father being beheaded.
Her brother being beheaded.
His wolf being shot to death. There's no head on her brother. The wolf's head on her brother.
But she can already guess the implication, having seen it firsthand with her father. And understanding that she had witnessed Greywind's last breaths. And having to watch that happen. And it gets worse if you think about the books sometimes, because there's a theory in the books that because all the Stark children are wargs.
I saw it, yeah.
There's a theory that,
I saw that theory.
Robb died twice.
Right.
And if they're trying to do the same thing in the show, which they really don't, but the implication can be there.
I thought Greywind's eyes looked kind of intelligent when he died.
When he sees Arya, it almost seems like his intelligence. But I don't feel like the timing is fully right there.
No.
But in the books, the theory is that Robb died twice. That he warged into his direwolf, and in his final moments as being Greywind, he also saw Arya. And that just makes the books a little bit more horrifying.
Super sad.
On that front.
Super sad. And with that, his entire pillar of hope of taking Casterly the Rock and getting a grand alliance and going to King's Landing and defeating Joffrey and nope, all of that gone. And why? Why did all that occur? Who got to the phrase? Like the big reason as to, who. Well, Frey and Bolton, right? And then Tywin.
I mean, Tywin, was behind the scenes constantly making that happen, absolutely.
I mean, I'm just saying, like, that...
I couldn't tell if you meant, like, Jamie had spoken.
No,
Jamie
but, like, Tywin was behind that entire thing. So it's not like the phrase did that of their own accord. That's what I mean.
They absolutely did it to gain favor with the Lannisters.
And so that they could take the...
and they took the Riverlands at that point. They were made the lords paramount of the Riverlands.
And then that's the whole reason Edmure is married to the daughter.
Yep. And, they eventually do have a child, and that already solidifies that he has a claim even more so because he has a Tully child.
Right. As
the soon-to-be Lord of the Riverlands one day. So, with that being said, let's go beyond the wall. Let's catch up with what
Way north.
Let's go way
north.
So, the cold open for this season picks up, thankfully, where the last season had left us.
Oh yeah, where Sam was totally supposed to be dead.
With Sam somehow surviving.
Somehow. He does this a lot, let it be known. The things where Sam should definitely be dead, and he isn't.
Yeah. It could be just its own little series of just things we could talk about.
Sam's misadventures
But Sam Sam was tasked with going and sending ravens south to let Maester Aemon and all the rest of the Watchmen down south know, like, we've been attacked by White Walkers.
They're real. They're here.
They're real. They're here. Send word to everybody.
Everyone needs to know. That's our entire point of being the Night's Watch.
I love J.R. Mormont's little monologue of just, everybody you've ever known, if we don't get back to the wall now, if we don't warn them, everybody you've ever known south of the wall will be dead come winter.
Oh, yes. Yes, his words.
Yeah.
His very, very intelligent words.
So he begins a breakneck march south to try and get them back to the wall. He pushes the men as fast as he can because he knows how dire the circumstances are. At this point, I think of the 300 that they had brought north, I think only 100 were left at that point, if I can recall.
Something like that. A large amount of them are now in the Undead's army.
Yeah. So, that is unfortunate for
They find shelter, again, with...
they find shelter...
Good old buddy.
With Craster, eventually. Horrible, horrible man.
Terrible man. But not... Well, maybe he's on the same level as some of the men under Mormont.
So...
who are pissed off.
During this time, because of the situation and because of how horrible it's been getting away from the White Walkers and the undead, some of these men who hate their lot in life anyway because they were sent to the wall, because they were rapers or murderers or whatever.
Thieves, terrible
just horrible people. They see in this moment a time to take what's theirs. And so Carl Tanner and Rast and a bunch of other Night's Watch...
bunch of jerkwads.
They take it upon themselves to kill Craster, first off. Craster is the first one to be killed. And then as Mormont raises his sword to go and kill Carl Tanner for his mutiny, Rast stabs Mormont in the back.
Oh, man. The mutiny.
The mutiny was awful.
Sucks.
And, it just...
Not unexpected.
That one was a little bit more expected, in my opinion, than, say, Rob's death. But
I knew Castor was going to die. I didn't think they'd go so far as to do that to Mormont. That's where I was.
That's the problem, is you have honorable men like Mormont and Starks and all these things, and honor means nothing to people like Carl Tanner and Rast. They have no lot in life. They have nothing to hope for, so they kill this man who did not deserve to die. He did not deserve to die the way he did. And he tells Sam to get out of there, and Sam grabs Gilly now, knowing that Craster is dead, so there's nothing to worry about.
Oh, yeah.
And thank God he does do that, because that way the the little baby who turned out to be a boy that she was so worried about last season when she met Sam, he gets to live.
Yay!
He actually gets to live.
Good for Sam Jr.
I mean, he gets to be called Little Sam eventually.
Little Sam, yeah. Much later.
But so he runs away with Gilly and they head south as well. Before we get back to them at the wall, John meets, first off, Tormund Giantsbane.
Not at the wall.
No.
Oh.
North of the wall.
Yeah,
Before we get back to the wall, Jon Snow meets, first off, Tormund Giantsbane. Which I already love that scene. Because he comes into the tent and he thinks that Tormund is Mance Rayder. And so, of course, he kneels to him first off. Which we obviously know the wildlings do not kneel.
What's this?
That at all.
What is this?
So he kneels to Tormund Giantsbane thinking he's Mance Rayder, calls him my lord and all these other things. And I still just love Tormund's reaction of just, oh, you should all start kneeling to me now. Oh. But I'm not Mance Rayder. And then
that's Mance Rayder.
He meets Mance Rayder and he sort of wins his trust.
Yeah.
Not fully. Mance later reveals he always kind of mistrusted him.
He had a good starting point by killing
him. By killing Coronel, he sort of, he gains his trust.
Which is exactly what, that he wanted.
Yeah.
And with that trust in mind, his friendship with Ygritte gets to advance. Right?
So, yeah, it does. But so he travels with the wildlings as they begin heading south. They actually started heading towards the Fist of the First Men to go and see what the hell was happening because some people had, some of their wargs had been scouting ahead to see what's going on and they see dead crows everywhere. As they so call the Night's Watchmen. And so John's obviously worried about them because, oh gosh, what happened?
But he's undercover right now,
yeah.
so he can't be too worried.
No, he can't be too worried.
But he's very worried.
But so then they go and they find, one of the Night King's little trolley swirls of dead horses and men and just it's
such lovely sights.
He's such an artist, the Night King and the White Walkers.
Oh man,
he's so good at
he's
art.
On Etsy.
Oh, God.
Follow him on Pinterest. No, I'm kidding. Just horrid creations. Just terrible.
But so then with that being said, Mance now knows, the Night King, or rather...
It's clear who the real enemy is.
The White Walkers are on the move.
Right.
So it's time for him to make his plan known, which he tells, John, how do you think I got all of these clans that have hated each other for thousands of years to follow me? I told them that if they don't get south before winter comes, they're all going to die.
Right.
Because, most of the clans of the wildlings, they hated each other.
Yeah.
Everybody hates Thens. You talk about...
scary.
The one tribe that everybody hates, it's the Thens. And the line is always, I hate Thens.
Some scary motherfuckers.
Because they're a bunch of cannibals and they're a bunch of assholes.
They look like orcs, bro.
I mean, kind of.
They look like straight up orcs.
I guess.
The closest thing in Martin's world to orcs.
Sure.
Thens.
Sure.
And then giants.
I mean, there was a couple of giants there among the camp, so that's pretty darn cool. Especially just to kind of show, these creatures that we once thought to be long dead are still alive. Not only White Walkers, but giants, dragons, all of these fun
They're all hanging out.
They're all hanging out. Mammoths!
Mammoths
were there, too.
There were some mammoths.
But so John joins up with the small group that Mance tasks with going south and going over the wall about 100 miles, I want to say, west of Castle Black.
Right.
So that's what they do. Along the way, John and Ygritte just really begin to grow their relationship, and eventually she gets to the point where she's like, yeah, you may say you're not a crow anymore, but I know you're not a crow, so you're going to break your vows for me. You're going to break your vows with me, and then we get to, their blooming romance, which obviously the chemistry was already there.
Wanting to kill someone, love. Yeah, the same thing.
No, just the way that they talked afterwards. And, John couldn't bring himself to kill her when he was supposed to. And then he feels responsible for her. And then eventually she feels responsible for him because he didn't kill her.
He likes redheads.
And he loves redheads. And there's just this whole dynamic of the chemistry was already there, and Kit Harington and his future wife, Rose Leslie, pulled it off. There's a reason those two got married in real life. Because you believe that their romance was real.
Characters evolve, man.
Yeah.
It's real life.
You believe their romance because those two
Kinda
eventually were real.
Very, if not very good friends, very real. Yeah, beginnings.
But so his romance with her blooms, and eventually he breaks one of his vows, which is that he shall take no wife. But by all means,
he's not technically taking a wife. Oh, he's
like he will do it obviously to stay undercover.
You could say John's a real tongue twister.
Oh God!
Because not only does he get out of vows and things, but he's also very favorable.
Yeah, he's very good with his tongue or his words. Alex wants to talk about that a lot.
Sure don't. But I did want to point it out.
We're gonna move on from that. But
great scene.
Just a fun scene.
Is
that what all the lords do to their ladies down south?
No, and that's why he's so different. That's why John is so different.
Anyway.
But yeah.
I always found it funny just because I liked that it was so the warg they have with them is the same guy who plays Rigetti from Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yes.
And it's so funny to see him go from the guy who lost his wooden eyeball and was just always like this hijinks person in Pirates of the Caribbean to he was actually kind of intimidating in like a really stalkerish kind of way, because he has a couple of conversations with Egret about like, oh, I could be good for you, but no, you like him for his pretty hair and all these things. And it's just like he comes across super creepy, and it's just like, dude, just.
I did like his power though.
I loved his power.
I loved the Lord stuff, but he was gross.
He was gross.
Gross guy.
He was gross and intimidating.
Yeah. Scary dude.
But so they eventually get to the wall.
He's still a bird,
Yes. Yes, he is.
We never see. He's still a bird.
No, he's still a bird. That bird never came back for revenge. But so they get to the wall, they climb up the wall. It's a grueling task that takes them at least a day or two. I can't remember exactly.
They climbed the wall.
They climbed the full length of the wall.
There must have been a better way, but I guess not.
No, there wasn't.
You can't go around it.
You can't really go around it because...
You gotta go up it.
Yeah, you gotta go up it because any castles that aren't manned, the tunnels are sealed after they're unmanned.
Right, there's only 3 that are manned.
Yep. So there was no way for them to break through any of those.
Up and over.
Up and over. And wildlings have been doing that for forever. I mean, obviously with OSHA.
Small groups.
Yeah. Small groups. Never.
Because we see why it's a problem when large groups try to climb the wall later.
Yeah, absolutely.
But they make it over. They get into the northern farmlands.
And I still love that. I love that episode because of obviously that moment that they peek the wall is preceded by a legendary speech by one of our favorite assholes in the show. But we'll get to King's Landing and it's whatever. But so they make it over the wall. They go south. John is still undercover until a moment where they find a man who supplies horses to the Night's Watch. And the wildlings are going to go and kill him. He hears them because of John's intervention. Obviously, he's doing his best to hide that he's helping, but he bangs his sword against a rock as they're running towards the stables. And the man hears him, gets on his horse, and runs away. This leads to a confrontation where they eventually catch that man, and they say, no, make John kill him. Show him that he's one of us now. And John can't bring himself to do it.
Nope. Just like with Egret. Can't kill this guy either.
He can't kill this guy either.
He has a hard time killing people, John does.
He has a hard time killing people who don't deserve it.
I mean, technically, in cloth hands, he just killed himself, really.
Truly, he staged
threw himself on his sword.
Yep.
John's like, what? No, I did. He's like, you did. You meant to kill me.
You killed me. So eventually John can't bring himself to kill this man, which then Egret, in trying to defend John, kills the man for him and is pretty much ready to die there with John.
Yeah.
Like, that's how much she loves him at this point. And Tormund literally had to wrestle her to the ground and say, he's not worth it, he's not worth it.
Nope.
And
And
he leaves her.
Yeah.
He straight up leaves.
Well, he leaves with 3 arrows in him, right?
No, not quite.
Oh, that's that later.
She hunts him down in the next episode,
that's right.
and that's where she puts 3 arrows in him. Obviously, arrows of love.
I don't want to bring it up, but we're going to get into it, I'm sure, later. But there's a group of other characters very close by.
Let's just go ahead and talk about it. At this point, the amount of crossover that happens between a lot of characters in this season.
We can make it really short, and Jojen's not with them yet, right?
No, Jojen is with them. Jojen joins Bran and his company this season.
As would be not completely, ridiculous. Both Bran and I always forget Rickon. They aren't actually dead. They made it out because
bullshit. Anyway, no, I'm just kidding.
Bullshit reasons. No, it's not. It's because Greyjoy's just...
Bran's got a coronation he needs to get to, so
Yeah, he's got to go. So they take those two and Hodor and the one crazy wildling lady who's reformed now. And they start making their way north to go tell Jon about what's happened, down here in what's the name? Winterhold, right?
Winterfell.
Sorry, Skyrim. Winterfell. They're like, we gotta go tell Jon. We gotta let him know. And on the way there, Jojen, this weird dude, and his sister. They're like, hey, there's a great quest. We have to go on it. And they're like, what? And they're like,
yeah,
come
with us.
Jojen
is the only one who is aware of the same thing that Bran's been seeing, which is the visions of the three-eyed raven.
The three-eyed raven, which we've talked so much about.
Oh yeah,
we'll get into that more, I think, as they get closer to him.
Like I've already told you, up to this point, most of the time Bran's storyline is always, boring to me, even though it's supposedly who has a better story than Bran. But
who has a better story? Season 8, we'll get to it. But yeah, they're making their way up north. They get into a tower, and then Jon and his troop come down and try to kill the horse guy. And they're like,
in the middle of
Hodor.
It's in the middle of a storm, which I just found so nice because it's just showing the inner turmoil that Jon is going through in his own heart.
Yeah.
Because he's trying his hardest to be loyal to the Night's Watch, but also loyal to Ygritte. And that moment just comes to a head in this storm that is scaring Hodor. Scaring the hell out of Hodor.
That's why he's saying his name so much.
He's just Hodor, while they're up there, and the lightning is scaring
Shut up,
Hodor. To which then Bran wargs into Hodor's brain to shut him up.
Yep.
Which, thank God it did, because otherwise Orell, the warg guy, was going to hear them. And he says, I heard screaming up there. Blah, blah, blah. Oh, it's just, you're just hearing nothing,
Yes.
Tormund, thank God, shoves it off.
Yeah.
Because they got bigger things to worry about, killing, horse owners and stuff.
But one of the many scenes of Starks being close together but just missing each other.
Happens
all the time.
God, with Bran and Jon, it happens twice. It's like this weird loop.
Twice, yeah.
Where once it's before the wall and the other time it's beyond the wall.
Mm-hmm.
We'll get to that one later. I actually really like Jon's moment where he finally kills Orell and he stabs him through. And as he's warging it, but like right before he wargs into his bird, he says, "You were right the whole time." Like just to get that knife in just a little bit. Like, you've suspected me of still being loyal to the Night's Watch. Well, guess what? You were right.
Yeah. How does it feel, buddy?
How does it feel?
With a big old knife in your heart.
And Orell kind of gets him back a little bit by bringing his bird down and clawing at Jon's eyes, which in the books, if I recall, I think it's a little bit worse. Like, the scars he gets left with are actually much worse than what he gets.
The dude's like it's his final hit on Jon, really, as he flies away and is a bird for the rest of his freaking life.
Well, whatever. At least he gets to go poop on Northerners.
I'm sure he does. So Jon gets away.
The next episode, he gets hunted down because obviously he's nursing some of his wounds. Ygritte tracks him down, and he straight up admits, I love you, but I have to go back to where I came from. I can't live this life. And just, she shoots him out of, her own love and anger about the fact that he's breaking her poor little Ygritte heart.
She's the feistiest Cupid ever.
She really is.
He lives, and she lets him.
Yeah, because that's the thing, is later on.
Loves him.
And we'll get to season 4.
We'll get there. Great on Castle Black.
It's so hard. You always want to talk about the lines that come back to confirm some of these things that we're talking about.
Yes.
Okay, let's go ahead.
Did they do anything else?
That
Hodor troop, they keep going north.
They keep going north. Eventually, they meet up with Sam and Gilly.
Oh yeah.
And that's the thing is I love Bran when they get to. I can't remember which castle it is, but it's the one that used to be like the main castle of the Watch. No, the Shadow Tower is the one on the far west. God, I can't remember. It's the one that had the actual Night's King, not the Night King, mind you. The Night's King, which is the tale of I believe he was a Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, who basically took a woman who it is theorized was a White Walker as a bride and like basically tried to become his own like warlord.
It's one of those lore videos.
So there was that, but then he talks about the Rat Cook, the story of the Rat Cook, who, I can't remember the full story, but it's a horror story that old Nan told him, and it was basically a very good thematic.
My heart was beating.
It's a good thematic. Parallel to what just happened to his brother down south, because it talks about how this cook took his the guest's son and served it to him in a pie, served the son to the Lord in a pie, and eventually the gods turned him into a giant rat, and it wasn't because of anything. It was literally that he had desecrated the sacred right of guest right. And so that kind of almost sets up this great, we just lost our boy Rob, but god damn it, the gods are going to punish Walder Frey for breaking the guest right.
Oh, yes.
One of these days.
I don't...
Just know it. It has to be.
I mean, he is. I stand by it could have been so much worse, and I'd be happier, but it's fine. What happens to Walder Frey? Anyway.
Okay.
So yeah, there's the Rat Cook. Sam and Gilly are there.
Sam and
they're
Gilly meet up.
scary. It's like
they scare Hodor a little bit, but then Sam leads them to where they came in through the wall.
Yep, and they keep going north because that's their mission.
And Sam tries to dissuade him, but blah blah blah.
No one listens to Sam.
No one ever listens to Sam because Sam's
Sam shouldn't even be alive. Why are we listening to you, Sam?
I love Sam, and Sam shouldn't be alive.
No.
That'll be a common theme.
That's
basically all the north stuff that
and a little bit south.
While we're still in the north, Theon goes through some he was captured by Ramsay Bolton,
who he learned to be. He's just some kid, and then he's Ramsay Bolton.
Yeah.
He thinks he's gonna be freed. He thinks his sister's there.
Ramsay just starts playing the sadistic games that Ramsay plays. And then eventually that ends with Theon losing his penis.
Yep.
So I don't know if we're gonna bleep that out or not, but yeah, he just straight up
Theon
loses
his dick. That can be. Those can be bleeped.
So whatever. I don't know.
Yeah. Yep.
That's
poor Theon.
That's poor Theon.
Well, he wasn't a strong man before, and the one thing he seemed to be proud of, I guess it's kind of thematic, was his penis.
Oh, absolutely.
And now he's lost that.
Yeah.
Now he's, what has he got? Which is, I think, really where everything starts, happening, where he starts to become this creature.
Yeah, he becomes a creature rather than a human at this point.
The thing called Reek.
Which I'm trying to remember. I think that he was called Reek by the end of this season, or if it was at the beginning of next season.
I don't know. He was tortured. It was rough.
He was tormented.
Ramsay's a sadistic character.
Psychologically, he was just not the same person anymore.
No.
So that's just kind of covering Theon's story.
Yeah, he gets betrayed. He thinks he's saved. He gets betrayed again. Loses his dick.
He's too trusting.
And now he doesn't have a dick.
For somebody who betrays a lot of people, he's too trusting.
He's kind of dickless.
Mm-hmm.
And now he's actually dickless.
Yeah.
There's going to be a lot of beliefs in this.
Okay, I get it. Anyway, let's go south.
Let's go to King's Landing.
Let's go to King's Landing.
Where the Lannisters have won and prevailed over Stannis Baratheon and his fleet.
And Tyrion has now been made no longer the Hand of the King.
He's no longer Hand of the King. His face is all messed up. And the old guy's out of jail.
Yeah, frickin' Pycelle.
Because why?
Don't know. Don't care.
Whatever reason, it's not good enough. You have a new Hand of the King. in Tywin Lannister.
Which, oh my gosh, the guy who literally has always been one of the better Hands of the Kings for recent kings.
Sorry, what, 20 years he was Hand of the King before?
I believe
all the stuff
King
went down.
Ares, yeah.
Yeah, now he's Hand of the King again. Oh, and he will not take anything from
Joffrey.
Nothing.
No.
Joffrey will tell him zip.
From a filmmaking standpoint, there was always this one scene that I loved for the way it was shot. Because Joffrey's sitting on the Iron Throne and he had summoned Tywin to come talk with him, and
Summon Tywin.
Yeah, exactly. So he summoned Tywin to come talk with him about some and he says, well, you've been holding your meetings in the Tower of the Hand. Well, the Tower of the Hand's where I work. And I'm old, and I don't really want to walk all the way to the small council chamber, and blah, 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 and all these things. And then it starts with Tywin being, the framing of it with the Iron Throne here, and then it's shot from behind Tywin. It starts with Tywin basically being level with Joffrey, and as it's being shot, him standing up and walking up the steps to the Iron Throne.
Those steps.
And it's very clear at this point that with Tywin being back in King's Landing, who's the actual power?
Who has it?
Not Joffrey.
No, Joffrey gets it.
And if I actually recall, at the very end of the season, when they are discussing the Red Wedding and its fallout, I believe that was where Tyrion first off gets his one-liner on Joffrey, where he said, monsters are dangerous, and right now kings are dropping like flies. To which Joffrey, starts getting really pissy, and then eventually Tywin tells him, the king is tired, go to bed. I'm not tired. But it's like he just sent Joffrey to his room. In that moment, it's just even more clear. As long as Tywin is in King's Landing, he's the real authority. As much as he can control, obviously there are little things that might happen that maybe he doesn't see coming, but for the most part, he is the power.
Yes, and we also see that power being kind of formed together as Tywin decides it's time for you to get married. And for all that process to get started. And so, this is who you're going to marry.
And Tywin starts marrying both of his children off to people.
Oh, and one's really not happy about it.
One is
Cersei
very
is
unhappy.
Not happy. No.
Nope.
Loras, not happy.
Tyrell, no. Screw that.
No.
But,
Marjorie.
But in his defense, I find it super funny because what he was doing was absolutely meant to circumvent the Tyrell's original plot, which was to marry Sansa to Loras, and thus making them have access to the north. A stake to the north. And they were trying to do that by stealing her out from under the Lannisters, which ended up not working out at all because Tywin intervened and basically said, no, Cersei's going to marry Loras, and Tyrion's going to marry Sansa. Which, I love that there's a line that Tyrion and Cersei, they're having a conversation about it, and they're overlooking Loras and Sansa having a moment because those two don't know what's happened yet.
Right.
And they're overlooking, and they're just, and Tyrion's just like, I wonder which one of the four of us has it the worst. Because it's when you really look at it, who is going to get screwed the most out of that exchange.
Right. I mean, this entire season, Joffrey's getting manipulated the entire time. You see very clearly how Tywin does it, where he's just this overbearing force. You do not question your grandfather, boy. You have Marjorie, who's just
doing everything she can to make sure that he likes her, but never questions her loyalty.
She's
to
so
him.
Smart and
I love the way
and
that
loving.
She changes her personality in such a way that it's no, I find that you're using this crossbow so cool, and can I hold this, and how does it feel to take life when you shoot this at something? She starts playing into his own demented thought process.
She can be a rose, but with him, she was the thorny rose. Yeah. And then you have Cersei trying to be she's quickly losing all sorts of control. So she thinks the one person left is Joffrey, and it's becoming very clear that Marjorie's taking that from her.
Yep.
So that's pissing her off.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, and then I guess Tyrion's still trying to. Well, he doesn't have much power anymore.
No, he doesn't.
He's he's still got his quips. And he's alive, which that probably pisses Joffrey off the most.
Pisses off a few of the Lannisters. Because by all means, if
Tywin and we have that really amazing scene where he confronts Tywin about Castle Rock in this season, don't we?
Yes. Because he goes to Tywin and he's like, I'd like my inheritance to Castle Rock. Because first off, Jaime is a member of the King's Guard and I'm your only son at this point who can inherit your title. So I would like to inherit it, especially for my bravery in the Blackwater, all of these things. Because it's like, nobody has thanked me for the Blackwater or anything like that. And I am being relegated to nothing more than this broom closet at the beginning. And Tywin just puts him in his place and reminds him, like, I can't prove that you're not mine, but say no more your claim to Castle Rock. You're ill-made, you're all... just lays it out to him, like, you only mean something to me because... I can't prove that you're not something to me. And it's crushing because you saw how well Tyrion played the game last season. And for him to be now put back into this place of, no, I don't have any authority anymore, sucks. Because I truly believe this as a what-if scenario. If Tywin had actually treated Tyrion the way he deserved to be treated, I think the Lannisters would have been the ultimate dynasty for the rest of the series.
They could have been.
Because, seriously, I bet they could have even taken down Daenerys Targaryen's army.
So just the capital is filled with politics and soon-to-be marriages and who's controlling who and who has what and blah, blah, blah. And the end of it... I think we get to it. Season 3, Sansa hears of her brother's demise.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
And
because this is right after their marriage, Tyrion and Sansa's marriage, and they kind of get to a point where they're having a decent relationship because
it's a friendship.
It's becoming a friendship because even on their wedding night, he basically says like, would you even consider being with me in the bed, or are you even comfortable with that? And she says no. And he said, okay, then I will honor that because I'm not going to rape you. I'm not going to do all these things that my father demands I do because...
He's proving he's as much of a Lannister as he's not a Lannister.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and I really like their relationship when they are pretending to be man and wife, which obviously they are officially man and wife, but they don't consummate the marriage.
His heart's with another.
His heart's with another, which I haven't talked about Shay for the last 2 episodes because I hate Shay. We'll get to Shay when it comes time for Shay's big moment.
Big betrayal.
But I hate Shay. I think
in the book she's good is what I've heard.
She's fine. With the problem I have with Shay in the show versus the books is show Shay actually, and like they talk about this, she genuinely loved Tyrion.
Right.
Book Shay doesn't love Tyrion.
Shay in the books is actually this like horrible
No, I wouldn't even say she's a horrible person. I'm just saying she's
manipulated.
She's just straight up a whore. She does everything she does for the Lannister.
She's more of a full character in the books, whereas in the show, the actress had a hard time actually being that, or did they actually ask her to be like in love?
No, I just think that's kind of how it was written. She actually was in love because ultimately when it comes back to her in season 4, the whole reason he even tries to send her away is because he's afraid she's going to die because at this point Cersei knows about her, all this stuff. Right. And eventually when he tries to get rid of her, he just calls her all sorts of awful names like, you're a whore and, you're not fit to bear my children. Right. And we'll get there. But she genuinely loved him, and the act of betrayal was almost because she felt betrayed by him.
Yes, that's right.
Whereas in the books, the love wasn't there in the same way that it was.
It was all an act.
It was all mostly an act.
Yeah.
which, don't get me wrong, the actress who plays Shay is good.
Oh, very good.
I don't dislike the actress.
No.
I dislike the character.
It's always the characters.
It's always been the character.
Yeah.
So I just don't find her as compelling until season 4 because she leads to some great moments for him.
Right.
So Shay, we kind of talked about Cersei. Let's touch on Jaime a little bit because Jaime is
getting dragged around.
Well, not only that, but he's probably the most compelling character of this season.
Right.
In my opinion. Because up until this point, he's been a person. He's been an absolute head to anybody who he's ever been around. He calls, Brienne all these names. He makes fun of Catelyn Stark, your husband, was so honorable and yet he cheated on you.
And the worst traveling companion.
He was just like the worst kind of traveling companion. Absolutely. But as you go, he starts to really open up with Brienne, and he starts to kind of reveal more about himself. And after he loses his hand, which already
humbled,
when he's already humbled by that experience alone, because he just lost his sword hand, the hand that made him one of the greatest warriors alive in Westeros by all accounts and purposes.
I mean, he has a tagline. He says there's only 5 or 4 men that could
best me in single combat.
Yeah, right.
And
to lose the hand that makes him have that kind of a status,
that'll
humble you.
He wants to die. He is trying to get himself to just fall off a saddle and break his neck constantly throughout it. He won't eat. He won't drink. There are all these things, and Brienne has to constantly be like, I was told to get you to King's Landing alive, and that's what I'm going to do, and all these things.
Yeah.
Eventually, they are picked up by some of Roose Bolton's men, which that's where he loses his hand. And then they're the ones taking them back to Harrenhal, which is now under Roose Bolton's control. And that's where he meets up with Roose. And they basically have this whole little secret meeting about, here's what's going to happen. If you send me back to my father now, even in my current state, I will tell him who it was who sent me home. And I will do my best to just, get you off the hook or get your guy, whatever. I can't remember his name. He's good. Locke.
Yeah.
Locke was, get Locke off the hook for, taking my hand, all this stuff. And then they make their secret deal, which already at that point, Roose Bolton is
with the Lannisters.
Getting sick and tired of Robb Stark, that's for sure. So he does that, and that's where he gets the words, the Lannisters send their regards, because as he sends Jaime off to King's Landing, send Robb Stark my regards, or send the Starks my regards.
But he can only go by himself.
He was told he could only go by himself, and Brienne would have to stay and be the entertainment for Roose's men that he was leaving behind at Harrenhal.
And he has one of the biggest changes of hearts.
So before we get to that moment, they have a moment where after Qyburn was introduced here at Harrenhal.
Oh yeah.
Qyburn takes care of Jaime's rotted stump.
Right.
To help, keep the infection from spreading too much further.
This disgraced, what are the names of the Meisters? This disgraced Meister.
Yeah. I was going to say he had lost his chain and was no longer considered a Meister. For doing dark and twisty experiments on dead people, essentially.
Which Bolton has no problem with for some reason.
Why would Bolton have a problem with that? He flays people alive.
Exactly. I'm just saying, well, and for Book Bolton, there's just a lot more.
Oh, he's the Leech Lord in that.
There's some stuff going on with him that I don't think they got to really in the show.
No.
But I think him and Qyburn's connection in the books is going to be much more closely connected, and I think those experiments might.
I guess we'll see.
I don't know.
They're kind of across the continent
right now. But I'm just saying how they found each other. It just seems interesting.
Okay. But so after Jaime's infection is brought down, he goes and he has a bath with Brienne. And it's in that moment while he's kind of delirious from all of the medication and whatever else has been done to him just to help make sure he's okay, that he starts talking about, his experience as a Kingsguard for King Aerys. His king that he slayed.
Kingslayer.
The Kingslayer. The reason he's called that and snickered at by so many people, and he's an oath breaker and all of these things. And he starts getting into the nitty-gritty of why, what makes certain oaths matter more than other oaths. Because, you're always told to love your father, love the king, be loyal to the king. Well, what if the king tells you to go kill your father? What if your father despises the king? What oaths are you willing to break?
And it loyal to the realm as well.
Yeah.
And that was the whole thing.
Yeah.
The king was asking him to...
So basically, the king was first off telling him to go kill his own father.
Right.
And then the whole time, the king is telling his pyromancers to go and burn down the whole of King's Landing with his caches of wildfire hidden throughout the city. And, burn them all, burn them all, burn them all.
Mm-hmm.
And he asks her a question, what would you do if your precious Renly told you to murder thousands of innocent people? Would you keep to your oath then? By what, and he just... And why didn't you tell Lord Stark? What good is there? What judgment can the wolf give to the lion? And it's like he didn't even bother to figure out what had happened, so why would I bother telling him? And he faints, and I love his moment where she grabs him so he doesn't fall and start drowning in the bath. And please help the Kingslayer. Jaime, my name is Jaime. Please call me Jaime.
Right.
He's always held on to that title in a way that he made it seem like he never cared. But ultimately he did care. Because he killed the king to show that he cared about the realm. He cared about the people.
Yeah, Jaime's deep. He's as deep as Tyrion.
Jaime is as deep as Tyrion. They are my two favorite. Well, I don't know. Tywin's probably still my favorite Lannister, but Jaime in this season especially shows that he's more than just this pretty asshole. Because before
he's not this cocky, I'll fight you with this.
I mean, don't get me wrong. He's cocky, but he has
not after
he loses his
when
hand.
Everything is taken from him. Who is he? And that's who he had to find. That's who he had to find. And I think Brienne helped him do that.
Yeah.
I don't think if Brienne hadn't been there, I think that depression would have killed him. That
Absolutely.
might have fall off and
Absolutely.
died. He had someone to confide in.
So then when he is being transported to King's Landing and Qyburn basically says, oh, she'll most likely be killed or raped or whatever while she's left behind, he's like, nope, we're going back.
Yep.
And
saves her from a bear.
Saves her from a bear. The bear on the Maiden Fair.
That's ridiculous.
It was horrifying.
Jeez Louise.
But
yeah.
Trying to think. So Arya.
There's the whole thing with
so the whole thing with Arya is her and.
Well, we can use the Hound to get to Arya, can't we? Because we left him leaving Blackwater
Well, that's the thing.
Bay,
So
going
technically,
to King.
we don't see anything of his story until it crosses with her.
Right.
Literally, the last place we saw him was him running away from King's Landing. So Arya and Hot Pie and Gendry are making their way north after leaving Harrenhal and after she got her coin from Jaqen and Hagar.
Yep.
They meet up with the Brotherhood Without Banners, which were actually introduced in Season 1 when Ned Stark sent out this group of about 100 or so men to go and bring the mountain to justice. And after the death of King Robert, they are still fighting for the people, so they say, which for the most part in this season, that is still absolutely the case. They are doing their best to resist the Lannisters and fight for what King Robert had originally wanted from, or rather even just Ned Stark had wanted from their group. But this is where we re-meet Beric Dondarrion, and we actually meet Thoros of Myr. So Thoros is a drunk red priest who has brought Beric Dondarrion back, I believe, 5 times up until a certain point this season. And that is where we meet up with the Hound again. He gets captured by the Brotherhood, thinking, that he was... I can't even remember what he was doing, but they capture him.
He was drunk. He was fucking...
Yeah, exactly. Looking for anything to do to get some money and live his life without Joffrey and the payroll.
And then he has a history with Dondarrion. Right?
Not really.
Well, he was being judged by the group, and if he, the quarrel, right? And they were trying to lay blame on him for some crimes.
Yeah.
And none of them stuck except for the
butcher's boy.
The butcher's boy, and he wouldn't. He was guilty of that.
Yeah.
And so that was.
So then they have a trial by combat where Beric Dondarrion is the
Fire sword.
Where Beric Dondarrion is the Hound's opponent, and the Hound gets a couple of licks because
he's scared of fire too.
He's so scared of fire, and so when Beric Dondarrion brings out his fire sword, it just all shows this. And Arya gets to see that fear as she watches him fight, and she talks to him about it later. I know what you're afraid of. I saw the way you looked at that fire. I saw the way the fire, the look it gave you.
Yeah.
But eventually he's able to overcome Beric, and he straight up kills him.
Yep.
And
straight up, Thoros goes over and starts whispering his ear. And we're
he just starts
dead.
laying over him and starts praying over him. And Arya's pissed off.
She wants him dead.
She wanted the Hound dead. He was on her list of names that she's been whispering to herself as she slept ever since Yoren told her his story about Willem back in season 2. And I would almost breathe it like a prayer. Willem. And she has her list of names. Cersei, Ellen Payne, Joffrey, the Hound, the Mountain, all these people. But she wanted the Hound dead, and when he doesn't die, she's just furious, and she wants to see him dead, and it's like, great, another good person died to try and take you down. And then all of a sudden you hear basically the Lord of Light's not done with Sandor Clegane yet.
And he's back!
And you see Beric Dondarrion saying that, and he's just basically fully reformed. It's like one of the few things where this wound that went through his shoulder actually had patched up in such a way you could not even tell. Whereas with some of his previous wounds, he'd lost his eye, there was this huge scar across his neck area, all these things. But he lives again through the power of the Lord of Light, we are led to believe at this point.
Thoros and Myr and Melisandre, pretty similar, doing different things.
Yeah. So
follow the Lord of Light.
So Thoros is the only one that we know up to this point who has the power of resurrection, which even he doesn't know why he was gifted this power.
And he's been using it.
He's been using it because at this point now it's been 6 times that the Lord of Light has brought Beric back. And then as we continue on with the Brotherhood, eventually they let the Hound go.
He survived the trial. He's good.
He survived the trial, and they let him go.
Arya's mad as hell about that.
Yep. And she's also really begrudging against Thoros for the fact that he can bring, Beric back to life, but nobody ever did something like that for her father.
Right.
So she already resents these people for so many reasons. And then the final resentment comes in the form of Melisandre.
Yes, she shows up. She needs a Baratheon boy.
Come and take the power of King's blood in the form of Robert Baratheon's bastard son, Gendry. And she gives the Brotherhood, a certain amount of gold. And this is after they had basically accepted him into their own.
They were
going to teach him how to be their new smithy person who's going to make arrowheads and all these fun gadgets and gizmos aplenty for them. And they sell Gendry off. And Melisandre has a moment there with Arya where she looks into her eyes and she sees a vision of all of these eyes that Arya will close. And that will lead into Arya's, story arc going into the next couple of seasons.
Sure.
Sure does. But then Arya eventually gets mad and wishes, these people would die, and she puts Beric and Thoros on her list of names, and then she runs away, and she gets captured by the Hound.
Yep.
And her and the Hound begin moving north. Not that she's aware of it. She thinks that he's there to take her back to King's Landing. And then eventually he says, because they're at the Trident, the River Trident, and he basically is like, do you not recognize that I'm taking you north? I'm not taking you back to King's Landing. King's Landing. And he's like, I'm taking you back to your mother and brother because there's a wedding at the Twins. And so that kind of gets her excited. And even though he's he's trying to ransom her.
Right.
It's still like
She'll be home.
she'll be heading home.
So there's nothing.
And she's with like one of the strongest characters she knows. As much as she hates him, she has to acknowledge that he is a strong fighter.
Oh yeah. And he all over her, her water teacher.
Yeah, no, there's that
dancer.
moment where she's practicing her water dancing with her little... Actually, no, we haven't gotten there yet. Sorry.
Needle?
No, she doesn't have Needle back yet, remember?
Oh.
She still doesn't have Needle.
It's a good scene. We'll get there.
We'll get there.
But yeah,
he kind of shits all over her beliefs on a lot of things, and there's one time where she almost tries to take a rock to his head, and he's like, you better make sure that you hit me good, otherwise I'm going to make sure your hands don't work to do that again.
The rock
so she thankfully does not try and kill him yet.
No. They make their way to the twins, and we know what happens from there.
We know what happens from there. We already went into detail as to what happened.
And she goes back with him at that point.
Yeah, because he basically pulls her away from...
he saves her, really.
He saves her, gets her out of the twins.
No ransom made.
Yeah, no ransom made, which sucks for him. No money to be getting.
But he also cares a little bit.
No, at this point he cares for her.
Yeah.
And so they escape. She meets up with some Frey men in episode 10, which one of them claims to be the one who slit Catelyn Stark's throat. And talks about, how the dumb cow made this horrendous screeching, wailing sound. And it was like, it's horrifying. And and she comes up and she's acting like she's a little beggar. And then she just straight up murders these 3 men.
Yeah.
And I love the shot with her blood-soaked hands holding that coin from Jaqen and whispering to herself, Valamukulis. So Arya's getting this bloodlust in her even more so than she already had, but now she's the one acting on it. Yeah. Trying to think anybody else on Westeros we need to focus. Oh, let's just talk about Littlefinger and Varys, because they have
sure.
They have their little things that are.
I like their little things. I do.
They have their things that are going on.
It's the matter
so we're gonna get to that because it's such a good scene. Because throughout this whole time, Baelish had Ros as one of his client, like basically his person who ran all of his brothels.
Right.
And after the killing of all the children back in season 2, she came to Varys and basically said, "I'm going to be one of your informants on Littlefinger." And up to a certain point, she was doing a very good job until eventually Littlefinger finds out about how she had been spying on him. And he, in this speech, it's in the same speech as the chaos is a ladder. He basically tells Varys, there's a mutual friend of ours who is no longer gaining me anything, so I got rid of my bad investment to somebody who was willing to turn her into something more useful. And that's where we get the reveal that Joffrey had killed Ros.
Because he needed some target practice.
He needed target practice.
Ugh.
It's horrifying.
Terrifying.
Because, Varys, being who he is always been loyal to making sure that the realm itself survives.
Right.
And what do we leave then? If we don't have the realm, we have chaos. Right. Chaos is a black pit. No, chaos is a ladder. And that's the thing with Littlefinger, is that as we've been going, it's just been revealed more and more that he would see the country burn if he could be king of the ashes. He is always vying for any sort of power.
Interesting quote, that.
Oh, yeah. We'll get there. He won't. He won't. Somebody will.
But yeah.
I just find their chess game that they're playing.
It's
with
a lot
each
of
other.
fun.
It's super fun. I love the way that they're both written.
Yeah.
And you don't always know where Varys' loyalties lie, but ultimately, he seems like he's a less chaotic force than Littlefinger.
We have to go to...
I was going to say, I think Westeros being done...
You have to go to Essos.
I'm not as disappointed in Essos this time around.
No.
Because while I hated Daenerys in Season 2, Karth was just not my favorite part of her story. I like season 3 Daenerys a lot. I like that she gets Barristan Selmy, first off, as one of her new advisors alongside Jorah. Saves her from the warlocks who had still been trying to get revenge on her for burning their main guy back in Karth.
Yep.
Which, we all knew that sending Barristan away from Joffrey's court was going to come back to bite them in the ass. Mm-hmm. And they deserve it, because then Barristan comes along, he's one of her new advisors, and he kind of helps, off-put some of Jorah's bad decisions. Jorah helps put off some of Barristan's bad decisions.
They're a good team.
They're a good team for Daenerys. I think that if they had truly worked out their differences in later seasons, I truly think they still would have been the best advisors for Daenerys Targaryen.
Yeah, and she defines what she wants, out of Essos, and when she does capture a city, she doesn't want. She doesn't want slavery. She wants to free those. She wants the masters to understand.
So with Daenerys, her first major victory this season is in Astapor, where she is introduced to the Unsullied, which are, and sorry if you hear any sirens in the background, folks. There seems to be some sort of pullover happening outside our window. So if you hear any of those out in the background, just don't worry about it. They're not coming for us.
Nope. Not this time.
Anyway, so Daenerys' main victory happens when she goes to Astapor and she's introduced to the Unsullied, which are these basically super soldiers trained to be resistant to pain, fear, death, everything imaginable.
There's one scene where a guy just gets his nipple cut off.
Yeah, straight up.
He doesn't care.
Krasny's monoclaws makes very sure to show her, these people do not feel pain, and he just straight up cuts this guy's poor nipple off. Oh my gosh, the amount of pain just thinking about that hurts.
That guy just stands there, doesn't even flinch.
I mean, when you've had your balls cut off,
Yeah, dude, but they were young when all that happened. This dude just walked up and was trying to prove a point.
Yep.
And now your nipple's gone.
So Daenerys doesn't have the money to make this happen because she sells the ship she sailed into Astapor on to get certain money. And basically, with the ship that she sells, he basically, I think he was only going to give her 40 to 80 people.
Yeah, small.
It was such a small amount of it, and he's like, I've got 8,000 plus another 2,000 that are being trained or something like that. And so then she makes the decision to sell him one of her dragons. He tries to haggle with her to get it up to the 3 or 2, and she just says, no, 1. And he's like, well, it has to be the biggest one, which is Drogon. Right. And she says, okay, that's fine. And her advisors are trying to caution her against this, in front of Krasny's. And she reprimands both of them. Don't question me in front of people ever again, because it might ruin my position. And then she asks him for the translator, Missandei, as a token of good faith or a token of a bargain well struck. Which is, first off, awesome, because she immediately says, you're free. You're going to be one of my advisors. You're going to be one of my helpers. But if you so desired, I would after this all happens, if you so desired, I would send you back to your home.
And she's like,
no, I'm loyal to you. And she already feels something different from Daenerys, because I actually really like it, because Missandei is actually already in on it. Because the whole time these guys are speaking Valyrian. Not High Valyrian, mind you. Valyrian. Just the bastardization of the language. Which Daenerys knows that, and High Valyrian. So this whole time she's been pretending that she only speaks the common tongue to Krasny's, because she keeps him ignorant as to her knowing how much he's insulting her in her mother tongue. And so when she gets Missandei, at some point Missandei says something or rather, Daenerys talks about how the road ahead will be hard. You could die, you could starve, you could do all these things, and she just basically acknowledged Valar Morghulis. Yes, all men must die, but we are not men. And I love that line from Daenerys. It's
a very
fun.
good line.
It's a good line, and then Missandei kind of smirks because she knows that Daenerys knows Valyrian at that point. And then that leads to a great scene when the handoff happens for the Unsullied versus the dragon. And so she gives Krasny's her dragon, and she basically, now that she has the whip, because he says, like, this whip is what, like, they will follow, anybody who holds this whip. And so she, practices a little bit with that, and she sees how willing they are to do whatever. And then while he's trying to get a hold of the dragon, she turns back to him and says in High Valyrian, a dragon is not a slave. And I'm gonna totally f up the Valyrian, but I want to say it was like Je ni Valyre. Like, you speak High Valyrian, and she's like, my name is Daenerys Stormborn. I am of Old Valyria. Valyrian is my mother tongue. Like, it's such a great moment where you see her literally coming into her own, where all of a sudden you see this is somebody who A, could be respected and feared, and B, she just, like, did a really good political turnover on this guy, where it's like, I'm sorry, you should have not assumed that I was an idiot. And then with that being said, she tells Drogon to burn him alive, and then tells the Unsullied, kill all the masters, kill all the slave owners.
And she takes the city.
And she takes the city. And she takes all of the Unsullied, which she gives them the choice. Like, you can follow me, or you can go and do whatever you want. And, one of them starts the stamping of the spears, and then they all follow her out of the city, because this is the one who brought them freedom. Because, once again, she's not going to force them to be in her army. If you want to follow me, follow me. And then that leads to them coming to Yunkai by the end of the season, which is also great. Along the way, we meet Grey Worm. He becomes her commander of the Unsullied. Which I loved Grey Worm. And he's simple at the beginning.
He starts off very simple,
but he quickly grows into his own. And his loyalty for her is great. And I also love that. I love the symbolism of, she tells them all, you can change your names, because they were all given these names that were meant to remind them of how low they were. Grey Worm, like small rat, like things like that. Things just to remind them that you are nothing but this. And he retorts and says, basically, no, I'm keeping this name. It gives me pride, because it's the name I had when Daenerys Stormborn set me free. So that's always a really cool moment there. Anyway, they go to Yunkai. There's all these shenanigans. And eventually the second sons, led by Dario Naharis, betray the rest of the mercenaries that Yunkai hires to help fight Daenerys, and then helps...
Because he falls in love with her.
Yeah, because he immediately falls in love with her because he finds her so beautiful.
By the way, that actor change completely threw me.
It throws me. We'll get there. I just still find it funny that it's Ed Skrein, the guy who eventually played Francis in Deadpool.
Oh, yeah.
I always found that so funny.
That is pretty good. Yeah.
Francis! I just want to see...
But yeah, any initial problems that she was going to have with the second sons was quickly
taken care of
by one of the second sons, who was like, no, they're mine to lead.
And which thankfully, he shows his loyalty by being the one who risks his life to go into Yunkai with Jorah and Grey Worm, and somehow the three of them, like, obviously I know that it's because the soldiers that came after them were slave soldiers. They weren't, like, trained like the second sons and the other mercenaries. So they easily take the city, and it's kind of this victorious moment for Daenerys right after we, the audience, have had a very crushing moment with the loss of Robb Stark the episode prior.
Yeah.
Because then all the slaves come out of the city, and, she walks among them, and they call her Misa, which is Old Giscari for mother.
Yeah.
So she has become the mother of slaves as
you
well.
have the falling of or was it that? There's a golden object at the top of Yonkai's.
No, that's not quite there. That's Marine.
Oh, I'm thinking
that we're getting there.
We'll get there.
But yeah, no.
But yeah, now you have a new protagonist that's taking on, the throne in King's Landing.
And this whole time you've had Daenerys being somebody you can kind of root for.
Yeah. And now she's really coming into
her own,
into her power, into her own, and into her
her quest.
Yeah.
Because she's trying to eliminate slavery. She's found something, and that's not an ignoble cause. That's a great cause to be for.
That's what Jorah was banished for.
Exactly. As she goes forward, though, she realizes that maybe the world isn't always so willing to change just because she wills it to change.
Right.
So, with that being said, there are probably some things that we missed.
There's a lot in these seasons, guys.
There is a lot in these seasons.
And these episodes get longer and longer.
As we go, we try to double back and get any things we missed from the previous seasons, and that will continue on to the ending. But it's fun for me to reminisce on this show that had brought me so much joy for many years. And I'm glad that I get to share it and talk about the differing perspective that Alex has.
Great fun, singular watch fantasy.
Yeah, I was going to say, just to give you folks at home a perspective, I probably watched the show 4 or 5 times through all the way with the exception of season 8. With season 8, when it was coming out, I watched the first 3 episodes probably 3 times as they were coming out. Episode 4 I watched twice, and episode 5 I watched twice. Now 3 times because I watched the ending with you.
And a few of the episodes.
And before I watched the ending episode with Alex, I had only watched it the one time, and I never touched it again until Alex finished the series.
Yeah.
Which, thankfully, by the time he finished the series, I could laugh a little bit at it.
A little bit better.
Just to give you perspective. So
time heals wounds, guys.
Time helps heal all wounds. Okay. With that being said, thank you for tuning in to Game of Thrones Perspectives. I'm your host once again, Burke, and my friend Alex and I are going to sign off until the next time we talk about season 4.
See you in season 4.